Use things like blocks to teach number concepts. These kids need to have concrete things they can touch to teach numbers. Here's simple things. 4 plus 5 equals 9. And you got little pieces here you can touch. Pennies work well. If you use coins, make sure you only use pennies, because if you mix up the coin denominations, that's going to confuse them. All right, this came from the TEACH program for teaching subtraction. 6 minus 1 equals 4. And when you take a piece away, you bagged it. You bag it. Here is 6 minus 5 equals 1. 5 pieces are bagged in a baggie now. Took them away. Now, how about social stuff? Now, the thing is, there's great variation in autism and how many social emotional circuits are hooked up. We have got to pound social skills into these kids. In my 50s upbringing, it really helped me a whole lot. But there's a difference between social skills and social emotional relatedness. They're two different things, and it's going to be variable as to sort of how much of the social emotional relatedness circuits are hooked up. And if you read the social relations book, you're going to see that Sean's got a few more circuits hooked up than I do, and it caused him a lot of frustrations. I'm like pure geek and techie. He's definitely not. Now, when Nancy put me in the brain scanner and had me looking at all kinds of different pictures of things, pictures of people, pictures of things, I was more interested in looking at the things than looking at the people. Well, the thing is, if you didn't have people interested in things, we wouldn't have any computers, we wouldn't have any electric lights. Tesla, who invented the power plant, would be diagnosed autistic today. I got social interaction through shared interests. We've got to get these kids in doing shared interests. You know, band club, music club, computer club, photography club. The only places where I was not teased was at horseback riding, Model Rocket Club, and Electronics Lab. Those were refuges away from teasing. That's where I got my social interaction, was through shared interests. Another thing that really helped me in high school was my high school science teacher. He gave me a goal of wanting to become a scientist, and that motivated me to study, because I was a goofball student who didn't study. I was getting plenty of work experience, but I wasn't interested in studying. Wasn't interested in studying until I had the goal of becoming a scientist. Mentors can really get a kid turned around. And how do you find mentors? They can be anywhere. They can be a retired engineer, retired computer programmer, and it doesn't matter if the technology's old. That doesn't matter. Because what you got to do is you got to turn the kid on. And you can turn him on even if it was vacuum tubes. You got him turned on. Now he's going to be motivated to learn about the modern stuff. But you got to get him turned on. You want to take fixations and broaden them out. If the kid likes trains, teach reading with trains. Teach math with trains. Broaden the fixation out. The kid also needs to learn how to do an assignment. Okay, let's say the kid likes to build with Legos, or he likes to draw. Well, maybe with Legos he ought to build the downtown bank building for you. In other words, get the idea of doing an assignment. Mother said to me, well, I want you to paint a picture of a beach. You know, she wanted to get me doing different things. If you don't learn how to do assignments, you're not going to be any good for employment. Okay, we've got a behavior problem. Is it behavioral, purely behavioral, or is there some biological problem there? You got to separate biology out from behavior. They both are very, very important. Okay, these are things that may need to be accommodated. Problems with the fire alarm goes off, it hurts the kid's ears, maybe you take them out before the fire drill. Tantrums in the supermarket, that may be sensory overload. May not be able to tolerate the supermarket. I can't tolerate having scratchy clothes against my skin. It's just absolute torture. I just can't tolerate that. All my underwear and shirts have to be washed before I can wear them. Just too itchy. And there's differences in cottons. Some cotton t-shirts itch, other cotton t-shirts do not itch. Problems with fluorescent lighting, we already discussed that. There's two things that people on the spectrum cannot do, and many brain problems cannot do: multitasking. Absolutely cannot multitask. You know, that's something I just can't do it. And then the other thing is, I do not remember long strings of verbal instructions. This is very much a problem. Get your boss to write it down. Tell your boss you love email and they just email you the instructions. Then you have it written down, because I cannot remember sequence. I still cannot do that even today. I have to write it down when I get directions from a gas station, or I don't remember. If it's more than 3 steps, I don't remember. My 50s upbringing really helped me. Turn-taking in conversation and activities. That was taught with board games, and it was taught with formal meals, sit-down meals and manners. You got to take your turn. The other thing is, it was taught with direct instruction. Let me explain what I mean by that. Okay, let's say I reached across the table for the serving dish. Mother didn't scream at me, no. She just quietly said, ask your sister to pass it. Okay, if I forgot to say please, Mother would say, you forgot to say please, or you forgot to say thank you. In other words, when the kid does something wrong, don't scream at him, just quietly give him a direct instruction of what to do. That was done with me. Being on time was expected. When I was like 5, I was given an alarm clock, and I was taught how to use it, and I was expected to be up on time for breakfast. Doing other things I was asked to do. I already talked about the assignments. Also doing things that please other people. You know, you do something nice to please somebody else. And social mistakes were just, corrected with instruction, not being screamed at. Okay, this is the behavior that's not tolerated. Rudeness simply was not tolerated, period. And when I did something that was rude, Mother explained to me that that's rude. You just have to explain, well, no, that's an example of rude behavior. Then eventually I get a whole file folder of a whole lot of specific examples of rude behavior, and you just don't do them. Bad table manners. Here's a biggie. Manipulating the teacher by having a tantrum. For me, there was consistent discipline between home and school. Big problem I'm seeing today is either the parents are way too lax and let the kids get away with all kinds of stuff, or the school is way too lax. It needs to be very consistent. These kids are masters at testing the boundaries, and they know just how to slack off and get out of doing stuff. And if I had a tantrum in school, when I got home, Mother would say, oh, Mrs. Deitch called today, and you had a bad day at school, so no TV tonight. And take TV away from one night. And there was no screaming. If I had a tantrum, she'd just put me in my room, and when I calmed down, she just would quietly say, okay, you can come out now, but there'll be no TV tonight. Laughing at somebody that's fat, swearing, when this happened, so no, you can't say that word, that's a bad word. No, just don't say it. Again, it was very clear, what the social boundaries were, and they were the same at school, same at home, same at the Woods house, the same at the Wright's house. But there was this one house in the neighborhood where I could really be bad. And bad I was. Okay, this is a rule system I still live with today. I've taken all of society's rules and I've put them into 4 categories. And I figured this out in high school. I went away to a special boarding school after I got kicked out of school for fighting. That's when I was 14 years old, I was kicked out of school for throwing a book at a girl who teased me. And I was at this boarding school, and I learned that I could break certain rules. There's other rules you don't break. And if you want to have a civilized society, you can't have really bad things like killing people, burning down this convention center, and ransacking it. I mean, otherwise you're not going to have a civilized society. Then you have the courtesy rules. Those were pounded in the 50s. Those help people to get along. Then you have things where you can break some rules, like some stupid school rules about, the age you have to be to go to community college. I mean, you can break some of those dumb rules. But then you've got the sins of the system. These are rules where there's draconian penalties. And they're very society-specific. Something that the sin of the system in the U.S. may be nothing over in Sweden. Some little sexual transgression in Sweden. There'd be no trouble at all. Get you on the sex offender list here and really wreck your life. That's an example of sins of the system. And boy, you don't touch the sins of the system. It's just that simple. And in my high school, the sins of the system were drinking, smoking, and sex. And I learned that if they could totally trust me on those, I could do a lot of illegals, but not bad. Like go out on the roof, ride my horse without a teacher present, as long as I was kind of discreet about it. The other thing is movies in the 50s had much clearer values of right and wrong. I was a great Star Trek fan when I was young, and Star Trek was, especially classic Star Trek, a very ethical show. And that had an effect on me. Okay, let's say you have a nonverbal individual that's been good, and now all of a sudden his behavior is just atrocious. The first thing you have to rule out is a painful, hidden medical problem. You have got to rule that out. First thing. Maybe he's got sensory overload. Or maybe he's got the fear of sensory overload. Because when he went into this room last week, the smoke alarm went off. So now he's afraid to go back into that room. Okay. Once we rule out those two things, then his behavior might be just behavioral. He might have learned that he can get out of doing something by throwing a hissy fit. Maybe he's frustrated because he can't communicate. Or maybe he's just trying to get attention. But you've got to figure out again, is it biology or is it behavioral? You've got to make that categorization. And there's some extremists in behavior therapy that don't believe in biological problems. Well, that's just extremist. And then there's other people that don't think it's all biology. It's both. Both are important. Okay, here are some of the examples of hidden painful medical problems. Acid reflux, heartburn, real big number one. I went to a very interesting talk by Dr. Brewy, gastroenterologist, and he described how he showed videos of nonverbal kids. One was doing weird saluting like this, weird saluting postures. And he was doing it to try to close the valve down here in the stomach to stop the acid from coming up. There was another kid that just wouldn't lay down, and it was because of acid reflux. And you'd expect them, if they had acid reflux, they'd hold themselves here. That's not always the case. Try treating them for acid reflux. Constipation, another big problem. Make sure they don't have that problem. Urinary tract infections, there's a simple urine test for that. Yeast infections, I have problems with that. I now have to be on a gluten-free diet, and I have to greatly restrict my carbs. Otherwise, I get yeast infections that are just awful, beyond awful. Ear infections, maybe a root canal gone bad on a tooth. You've got to rule this stuff out. You've got to rule out the hidden, painful medical problems.